today's video we shall be discussing the different types of infections. What is an infection? An infection is an invasion of body tissues by pathogens or germs and their multiplication or replication inside those tissues. The germs may be acquired from the environment, from other people, animals, or from within one's own body. Infections from within the body, known as endogenous infections, occur when our normal flora either overgrow or they end up in a place where they are not supposed to be. There are different types of infections. Infections can be caused by prions, virusoids, viruses or virions, bacteria, fungi, and parasites. Prions and virusoids are non-living pathogens. They are made up of complex molecules that can infect someone and then replicate in their body. Bacteria, fungi, and parasites, on the other hand, are living organisms made up of living cells. Viruses or virions fall somewhere between living and non-living. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but hopefully it will make sense in a moment. Let's begin with the prions. Prions are protein molecules that are misfolded forms of normal proteins that are normally found in our brain tissue. The misfolding of these proteins may occur due to a mutation in the gene coding for this protein, or it could occur spontaneously. These misfolded proteins can be transmitted from one individual to another, or from an animal to a person, through the consumption of contaminated food. The risk of transmission is higher in communities where cannibalism is practiced. Prions can also be transmitted through invasive surgery, in which instruments are reused, particularly brain surgeries, as well as tissue grafts like blood transfusion or corneal grafts, among other surgeries. Once an individual is infected with a misfolded protein, this abnormal protein, once inside your body, induces the normal proteins in your body to also become misfolded like itself. The end result is a rare group of diseases known as transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, which is a group of degenerative diseases that make the brain tissue to become sponge-like as a result of the death of brain cells that is caused by the misfolding of these proteins. As one loses their brain cells, the brain begins to malfunction and they end up with challenges like memory loss, impaired movement or speech, among other symptoms. Examples of these transmissible spongiform encephalopathies include Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, fatal familial insomnia, Kuru, Gassman-Stroessler-Skyenka disease. Wow, I almost bit my tongue on that one. Let's move on to talk about the virusoids. Virusoids are single-stranded circular RNA molecules. They are a type of molecules known as satellite RNAs. They are called so because they are not capable of independent replication. Unlike viroids, which is a similar kind of molecule that causes infections in plants. For successful replication, virusoids require that a cell be co-infected with a helper virus such that they can be able to replicate themselves. There is only one known virusoid that can infect a human being, and that is none other than the hepatitis delta virus or hepatitis D virus that requires co-infection of the liver by the hepatitis B virus for successful replication. Note that I wrote the word virus here in a red font to try to remind you that it's called a virus, but technically speaking it's not actually a virus but rather a subviral particle. Now let's move on to talk about the viruses or virions. These two words essentially mean the same thing, but just different phases of the same particle. A virus is the form of the particle that has entered into the host cell, whereas a virion is the complete packaged particle that is outside of the host cell. Virions are particles that are made up of a core of genetic material that could be either DNA or RNA, which is coated with a protective layer of proteins. This genetic material, together with the proteins, form a unit that is known as the nucleocaspid. Virions take up different shapes, as we shall see in the next slide. Some viruses have an outer lipid membrane coating the nucleocaspid. These types of viruses are known as the encapsulated viruses. Viruses can only live inside a host cell, and that's why they are called obligate intracellular pathogens. It is for this very reason that scientists are quite uncertain whether viruses qualify to be referred to as living things or non-living things. Because once inside a host cell, they seem to possess the properties of living things such as reproduction. Whereas once outside that host cell, they lose those properties completely and sometimes are even able to form crystals. The second reason as to why viruses cannot be classified as a living thing is because they do not have a proper cellular structure. Once a viral enters into a host cell, it arrests and utilizes the machinery of that cell for its own replication, killing that cell in the end. There is a multitude of diseases that are caused by viruses. The human immunodeficiency virus causes the AIDS disease. The human papillomavirus is responsible for cancer of the cervix, vagina, mouth, and throat, among other cancers. The cytomegalovirus is another example of a sexually transmitted virus that infects various body organs, causing different kinds of diseases. The varicella zoster virus is the virus responsible for chickenpox. The novel coronavirus is the one that causes COVID. The respiratory syncytial virus causes a kind of viral pneumonia. Rhinoviruses are the ones that are responsible for the majority of the common colds that we suffer from. Adenoviruses cause infections of the throat, the eyes, among other body parts. Noroviruses cause a lot of viral diarrheas, together with the rotaviruses. Ebola virus causes the Ebola disease, among a lot of other viruses that can cause human infections. Here is a picture to try to illustrate what I just described as the structure of a virus. Essentially, in many of these particles, you can see that there is a core of genetic material, coated with proteins forming a nucleocaspid, and then the majority of the ones here, if not all of them, have an outer membrane encapsulating them. In this picture, you can also note the different shapes and sizes that exist in the world of viruses. Next, let's look at the bacteria. Bacteria are primitive, single-celled microscopic organisms that lack a nucleus. Note the word microscopic. All the germs that we have discussed so far are submicroscopic pathogens, meaning they cannot be seen under the light microscope owing to their very small size. Also note that bacteria have been described here as primitive because they lack a nucleus. The ones that we are going to look at hereafter all are made up of cells which contain a true nucleus. Bacteria, on the other hand, just kind of have an empty cytoplasm with their genetic material freely suspended in that cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is just, a liquid gel that essentially makes up the bulk of this cell. Okay, and this cytoplasm is enclosed by a membrane and the cell wall, except in a few cases, because we have a few bacteria that actually lack a cell wall. For example, a genus of bacteria known as the Mycoplasma. Bacteria, just like we saw with the viruses, have different shapes, and they also take up different configurations as they arrange themselves. Some arrange themselves in clusters, whereas others arrange themselves in chains, and so on. Majority of the bacteria are capable of independent survival in the environment outside the organisms that they infect, except of course a few cases like gonorrhea, chlamydia, among others. Several good bacteria live in our bodies as normal flora. I call them our friends because they protect us from other harmful bacteria that could invade our bodies. They are also responsible for keeping our immune system active and well developed. They also make some vitamins that we cannot make in our own bodies. So not all bacteria are actually bad, but a lot of them are actually good bacteria. As a matter of fact, the number of bacteria that we have in our bodies as normal flora outpopulate our own body cells. Isn't that something interesting? I actually think it is. Now, not all bacteria are really good guys. We have a lot of bacteria that can cause diseases in human beings, including our own normal flora, like I said earlier on. If they overgrow or if they end up in a place where they're not supposed to be in our bodies, then they could cause us disease. Examples of diseases that are caused by bacteria in our bodies include bacterial meningitis, which is an infection of the membranes that coat your brain, bacterial pneumonia, which is a bacterial infection of your lungs, typhoid fever, which is a bacterial infection of your digestive system, bubonic plague, which is quite a rare disease today but used to cause outbreaks back in the day, impetigo, which is a bacterial infection of your skin, urinary tract infections, abbreviated as UTIs, gonorrhea, which is a sexually transmitted infection, syphilis, tuberculosis, trachoma, which is an infection of your eyes, among other diseases. Now, let's look at the fungi. Hopefully these are fun guys to look at. Fungi are a group of living germs, some single-celled, while others are multicellular. They are saprophytic organisms that possess a wall made of chitin. The unicellular fungi are generally spherical in shape, as we can see in this image here. You can see the cell wall there and then the cytoplasm inside it. Whereas others are made up of fibers known as hyphae that form a network that is known as a mycelium. There are also other larger fungi that do not essentially cause human disease. For example, the mushrooms, the puffballs, among other fungi. We'll call them fungi. Fungi feed on dead decaying matter, like the bread that you see in this picture with mold growing over it, the decaying fruits, okay? Or if they are in your body tissues, then they feed on your body tissues. Fungi, just like bacteria, cause a multitude of diseases. Examples of such diseases include ringworm, joker's itch, diaper rash, athlete's foot, the rose gardener's disease, aspergillosis, cryptococcal meningitis, candidiasis, among other fungal diseases. Okay, enough of the fungi. Now let's look at the parasites. The parasites range from the single-celled protozoa, like the amoeba that cause dysentery, plasmodia that cause malaria, babesia that cause babesiosis, the brain-eating protozoa, trypanosoma that causes sleeping sickness, trichomonas that causes trichomoniasis, also known as trich, which is a sexually transmitted infection. Parasites can also be worms like ascaris, hookworms, pinworms, whipworms, tapeworms, liver flukes, bladder flukes, lung flukes. They can also be external parasites, which are essentially the arthropods, like the mites, the lice, the ticks, and the fleas, which essentially feed on the host from the outside of the host's body, as opposed to the internal parasites or the endoparasites that enter inside the host's body and then feed off the host. I think that sums up our discussion on the different types of infections. Now tell me, which of these types of infections freaked you out the most? Let me know in the comment box down below. Might you actually have liked any of the images I used in this video? I have shared the image credits with their respective source links in the description box of this video, as well as the licenses under which they are shared. Did you enjoy the video? If it's a yes, then it's a fair reason to hit that like button. And do you want more of this? Well, then hit the subscribe button with our profile picture at the center of your screen or below the right bottom corner of this video. And of course, don't forget to turn on your notifications such that you're the first to know every time we release a video. And oh, do you have a concern, a question, a request, or a comment? Don't hesitate to drop it in the comment box below or to email us on medicory@gmail.com. Otherwise, that is it for today. Thank you for watching till the end. See you next time.